Om Shruti Smriti Purananam Alayam Karunalayam Namami Bhagavad Padam Shankaram Lokashankaram Shankaram Shankaracharyam Keshavam Badarayanam Sutra Bhashya Kritau Vande Bhagavantau Punah Punah Ishvaro Gururatmeti Murti Bheda Vibhagine Vyomavadvyapta Dehaya Dakshinamurtaye Namaha Om Gukarastvandhakaro Vai Rukarasthannivartakaha Andhakara Nirodhitvat Gururityabhidhiyate Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Where did we leave the last talk? We left it with the as though student going to the as though teacher, where in this embroidery, tapestry, stick figure, teacher, and as though listening to the Shastra and as though getting liberated. Bondage, as though. Liberation, as though. Jivatvam, jivahood, jivaness, as though. Ishvaratvam, ishvaraness, ishvarahood, as though. Jiva and Ishvara are one, same thing. But that same self-effulgent consciousness without a second, which is sentient, which is all-knowing, which is the only source of all existence and which is limitless. Endowed with this Maya Shakti, on the one hand, gains the same consciousness, gains the status of the ruler of the universe. Maya is a seamstress. She stitches for Brahman a cloak with gold threads, and on the border there are galaxies, all wonderful planets and galaxies. Dressed in this cloak, Satchidananda says, I am the ruler of the world. I am the one in whom everything rises, by whom everything is sustained, in whom everything goes back, resolves. And this is Brahman invested with all knowledge, called Ishvara. The same Brahman invested with Atma Ajnanam. Same Brahman has Atma Ajnanam. And then how? Because of Maya. Mother Maya's embrace is enough to have Atma Ajnanam. And so the same Brahman, Maya also stitches something. What does she stitch? Rags. Some rags, tatters, put together, patchwork. Sometimes looks like a clown. Sometimes these clown dresses, various unmatching colored patches, like that. And then dawned in that same Brahman, which is Satchidananda, manifests the limitations of the upadhi, becomes as though one with the upadhi, like even a crystal. And what does this crystal do? This crystal, shines in the colors that surrounds it. So much so that one thinks, oh, this is a blue crystal. Crystal must be really blue. No, lo and behold, suddenly it is yellow, green, whatever it is. So taking on that blueness, as it were, the crystal appears blue. Similarly, taking on the tattered and mismatched clothing of a fool, of a clown, Satchidananda looks sad. Save me, help me, let me out. First it is let me in before the embodiment, okay? I have so many desires, let me in. I want to be incarnated. I have so many agenda to fulfill. Give me life, let me in to the universe. And then soon after that, what happens? Let me out. I've had enough of this. This universe is a very big, bad samsara. Let me out. And so, this so-called difference between Jiva and Ishvara is as though born. It's not there. It's just in the so-called clothing. Maya is a skilled seamstress. In the Viveka Chudamani, the same thing is discussed with a different example. A Raja, a king, is there, and the king has one, what do they call the person? Dwarapalaka, the sentry. Yeah, that's the word I was looking for. A sentry who is posted at the door to the king's court, where he holds court, that assembly hall. So there is somebody guarding the door, a mere sentry, a low life, if you will, in terms of the hierarchy. Nobody bothers about him. Nobody even knows how he looks. I mean, the closest example we have is those what is that? Those people in the Buckingham Palace sentries, and they have all these uniforms and a series of bumblebees on their head. It looks like this furry cap. And then, you can't really, unless you really go spend time with them, you won't even be able to tell them apart, because they are chosen to be of a similar height and everything. So they kind of match. So like this, who looks at a sentry? Hardly anybody. Certainly not all the VIPs that hobnob with the king. They don't have time to look for the sentry, look at the sentry, etc. Much less talk to him. So the sentry is there guarding the hall where the king is sitting. And the king, of course, is all in his finery. Then what? Then there is some play of fate. Let us imagine, the Viveka Chudamani says. And then let us say that they were drugged, both of them. And they both went to sleep. And then the costumes were switched. The king is now in the sentry's costume, and the sentry is now in the king's costume. When they wake up, first thing the other servants and attendants of the palace do is kick the king. Kick the king? OMG! What kind of a conduct is this? Because they mistake him for the sentry. Hey, you're sleeping on the throne? What's wrong with you? Off with you! And then the sentry, who is lying by the door, when he comes to, all the attendants go to him, Maharaj, what happened to you? Oh, your majesty, looks like somebody did something. What happened? Why are you lying here? Your bed awaits. Please, let's take you there. And the sentry, let's say, decides not to protest and not to tell them his real identity. Not to tell them anything at all. He says, yeah, I don't know how I got here. I must have had a little too much to drink or got disoriented. Take me back. And then the palanquin comes, and then they take him back to to his room and massage his feet and hands, and then, make his bath ready and put him to sleep. And whereas this man, the king who in the sentry's costume, is protesting in vain. He's protesting. No, I'm the king, really. Ha! We have seen the likes of you. If you have the local toddy to drink, everybody will start feeling that they are the king. Big deal. Off with you. In fact, we are going to fire you from the job, the chief minister says, but we will let the king decide when he wakes up. And then when he wakes up, the king, who is really the sentry in king's clothes, says, this man is an outrage to the palace. These are not the kind of behavior and values that we want around. Actually, I want to say off with his head, but let him leave the kingdom and just go away, far away somewhere. This is what the sentry can do, dressed in the king. So here, the effect of Maya on Satchidananda is somewhat like the sentry and the king story. Same thing. Same Satchidananda, dressed in its finery, and the dressing is mithya. Stitching is mithya. Donning on the dress is mithya. But donned in all the finery, jewels, all the accoutrements of power, scepter and crown and all these things. When the British Queen, she visits the parliament once or twice a year to give a speech, she has to wear a crown. Poor thing, she's 95, and all those crown jewels, so heavy. So now what they have started to do for the last 2-3 years, as she has aged, is that the crown goes first. The insignia of the queen goes on a cushion, by some very senior, person. Some chancellor or somebody like that will carry that and put it on its own little stool, which is next to the throne that the queen occupies. You see, these are all insignia, the stamp of power. And that's how the tradition is. So Satchidananda plus a finite stamp of power is still infinite. And then the jiva with a stamp of what? What shall we call it? Disempowerment. Still infinite. Jiva is Satchidananda plus disempowerment. Neither the stamp of power nor the costume of disempowerment affects Satchidananda at all. Satchidananda is infinity, is you. So you plus a new dress is nothing. You plus an old tattered dress is nothing. You are still you. And this is exactly how this whole Maya business has to be understood. There is no other way to understand it. So, what to do? So both Jivahood and Ishvarahood are as though creations of Maya. This is what our discussions have yielded. I'm just summing up. First, Jivahood and Ishvarahood are both as though creations of Maya. And what is Ishvara's creation? the, the all knowledge and that projection, the projection of of this thing called the Jagat. And it doesn't stop there. Ishvara's creation includes the entry into the Jagat, the as though entry, pravesha into the Jagat as well. That also has to be reckoned. Yeah. So kamayat, all the way from saha akamayat, this great being visualized, and then having visualized, contemplated on the previous cycle of creation, and having contemplated on the previous cycle of creation, projected a new cycle of creation, having projected a new cycle of creation as though entered each and every aspect of the creation, so everything is Bhagavan. This constitutes Ishvara's creation. And the Jiva, being Satchidananda, really in a costume, also wants to create. So what is Jiva's creation? The Jiva's creation, ignorance. And then one's own personal waking world of what? Adhyasa, projections, all kinds of projections. This is Jiva's world. All kinds of projections, useless mistakes, misunderstandings, misapprehensions, and then all the way to going to the teacher and then gaining the release from ignorance. This is the Jiva's journey. So we see Ishvara's journey, mithya, Jiva's journey, mithya. And then but then, seen from the standpoint of Satchidananda, there is no creation. This may seem a little harsh to the people, to the what is it called? To the orientation. Everybody has a Srishtivada orientation. Srishtivada means, they are believers in the creation. That is the general orientation of most people. But seen from the standpoint of Satchidananda, you can say, what creation? Well, what about the as though creation? My point exactly, it is as though. So what are you talking about? If it is as though, then why are we reckoning it in our understanding of reality? So therefore, Satchidananda stands apart like the crystal, and Maya is the various, can be compared to the various colorations in which the crystal, takes on the various colors of that particular, whatever is there, of that particular background. And then, so therefore what? So this, for this Satchidananda, no birth, no death, no bondage, no studying Vedanta forever to work out some, release, no sadhaka, no mumukshu, no mukti. This is esha paramarthata. This is what the reality is. And we say this prayer every day. Ishvaro gururatmeti murti bheda vibhagine Vyomavad vyapta dehaya dakshina murtaye namaha. We say this prayer. Unto that Dakshina Murti, my namaskars. Who is this Dakshina Murti? The one that has torn asunder the divisions between Ishvara, Guru, and the I, the self, by revealing everything as Brahman, Satchidananda. All the distance between the Jiva and the Ishvara are gone. Jiva is Ishvara. All that is there is Ishvara, aka Brahman. That's all we say. We don't say Ishvara is mithya. Ishvaratvam is mithya. This is very important to point out. Ishvara-ness, Ishvara-hood is mithya. And then, So no birth for this, no death, no bondage, no liberation, no sadhana, no sadhya, nothing to follow, nothing to get away from. No raga, no dvesha, no pratibandha, obstacles. Why? Because this Satchidananda, which is the truth of oneself, is always asanga, associationless, unchanging. This is how to understand it. And then then what about this Maya? A very beautiful verse in the Panchadasi itself, in chapter 8. There is a very nice verse towards the end of chapter 8. Maya megho jaganniram varshatu esha yatha tatha chidakashasya kahanihi kolabha iti sthitihi. Sthiti means abidance in the knowledge is as follows. A deep abidance in the knowledge is as follows, and a perfect understanding is as follows. Maya megha. Maya is compared to a dark cloud. And then what does the cloud do? Of course it rains. So Maya rains. When the cloud rains, there are drops of water. When Maya rains, she rains the whole Jagat. Maya megha. Maya is the cloud. Jagat Neeram. The rain is Jagat. And then, what is the person of knowledge? The Jnani, what does the Jnani, who is above all the Tamasika, Ghora and the Mudha Vrittis, what does the Jnani say? The Jnani says, Varshatu Esha, let her rain. Sung to the tune of let it snow, let it snow, let it snow. Let it rain, let it rain, let her rain. Yatha tatha, yada kada, wherever she wants, let her rain. Whenever she wants, let her rain. No pun intended. Rain means rain, not R-E-I-G-N, okay? That is what we are trying to stop. The reign of Maya over our lives. So, let it rain. It's raining objects, it's raining events, it's raining certain newly discovered animals. Let her do that. When you see the rain pouring, everything becomes wet except for one thing. What is that? What does not become wet? Akasha, space. Space does not need an umbrella from the rain. See how brilliant this is. Space does never need an umbrella from the rain. Space is as it is, associationless, birthless. Similarly, that space is Chidakasha, the space like Chit, the space like consciousness, birthless, deathless, unassociated with anything. Chidakashasya kahanihi. So how come you are being generous and say, let it rain? We can say that because I am Chidakasha. I am that space-like consciousness. I can accommodate everything and anything because whatever I accommodate is not belonging to the same order of reality as I. And so therefore, let her reign. Let her do whatever she wants. Chidakashasya kahanihi. Like the space untouched by the outburst of a cloud, similarly, the consciousness is untouched by all the difficulties, challenges, etc. in the Jagat. Alienation, sorrow, anger, fear, totally untouched. And then, Esha Sthitihi. This is the abidance in the knowledge that the wise people have. This is exactly the abidance in the knowledge that the wise people have. Let Maya do her job, no problem. It's like when you go for a walk by the river and your shadow falls on the water, you then do not ask for a towel, correct? To dry off the shadow just in case it will catch a cold. No such thing. Because you know that the shadow does not belong to the same reality as you. So therefore, this is where the person's the right effort for this knowledge and the right way of understanding is extremely crucial. And then that's why in verse number 24 here, what is said, Ghora mudha dhiyor dukkham evam maya vijrimbhita shantadi buddhya vrityaikyat mishram brahmeti kirtitam. So the sorrow arising out of the preponderance of ghora and mudha vrittis is because of Maya. And then in all these vrittis, there is a oneness. There is an aikya. Aikya means oneness, the identification of Brahman. And before the word identification, we have to add as though. An as though identification of Brahman with the Shanta, Ghora and Mudha vrittis. And that's why here Brahman is known as Brahman conditioned by these vrittis. There is neither conditioned nor there is conditioner. This is just talking about the empirical reality. And the empirical reality is not something to, according to the Panchadashikara, not a place to spend a lot of time in cognitively. Physically, well, yes, we are here. Yes, there are whatever things to do are taken care of, are done. Whatever responsibilities are there, Swadharma is there, Vishesha Dharma is there. All these, we talked about. Samanya Dharma is there. All of them are taken care of. But this is not the place to play. Play happens in one's own glory. Atma Ramah, Atma Ratihi, Atma Kridah, the one who delights in oneself. The empirical world is like a wrung out piece of orange. No sweetness, no juice, nothing. If you take the orange and already you have used the pulp to make juice and you throw out, you put the rest in recycling, what is that? That is not something worth eating or enjoying. And seeing it like a wrung out piece of fruit, which has neither taste nor juice, is, is wisdom, is objectivity. This is what Vairagya is. So from the standpoint of the Panchadashikara, the empirical world, let it be there. Oh, it's so enjoyable, fine, as though enjoy. But if you start investing your reality, your truth meter there, if you start investing in it as though it is real, it will definitely, most certainly, and always disappoint. Definitely. No doubt about it. And then therefore, this has to be understood, and the reliance on the empirical world for one's happiness has to be made less and less. The less one relies on the empirical world and the objects therein, objects include people, events, situations, things, etc. So the less one relies on the empirical world and the objects that it has to offer, the greater is the fulfillment of oneself as free, clear, whole, wondrous, etc. Very, very nice. And then as one divests from these objects over which one had really spent a lot of time and energy to cultivate a certain relationship, thinking that it was infinite or it would lead one to the infinite, then the clarity of oneself as the only thing, as the only entity in the entire universe that is self-standing and not needing a prop, emotionally, mentally, physically or spiritually, becomes very, very clear. So then if how to get there, that is what is given here, starting with verse number 25. Evam sthite atra. Evam sthite means this being the case. This means what all we have talked about until now. This being the case, evam sthite atra, in this context, yaha puman, the person who brahma dhyatum icchet, the person who desires to contemplate upon Brahman. First of all, why would anybody wish to contemplate upon Brahman? This we have to clarify first and foremost. Why would you want to contemplate on Brahman? The contemplation of Brahman is a way to get rid of, what is it called? Habitual orientations. This contemplation has a name, has a word in Sanskrit, nididhyasana. Nididhyasana. The contemplation is called nididhyasana, and this contemplation is, what does it entail? It entails in dwelling on the words of the Shruti, of the Shastra, of the Upanishads, which of course you have been exposed to and studied. Like a cow chewing the cud in the pasture. The cow has 4 stomachs, okay? Big animal. And then first when it's let out to pasture, then it doesn't know how much time it has. And then it is hungry, so it quickly just swallows up all the grass, whatever is there, without really chewing it. And then it finds it has a lot of time at its hands. The farmer has not come to put the cow back into the stables. So it will sit under the tree, regurgitate what was eaten, chew it properly, enjoy the wheat grass juice nicely. And this is like the eager brahmachari. Signs up for every retreat. The student, brahmachari here means student, signs up for every retreat and signs up for every talk. And then the hunger and the thirst for Vedanta is so much. Finally, being face to face with this knowledge, which was the answer to all of one's questions. The student, the eager beaver student, disciple, nibbles on the Kenopanishad, on the Kathopanishad, on the Mundakopanishad, on the Mandukyopanishad, on Panchadasi chapter 15, on this, on that, on everything. Then what? Then suddenly, okay, I feel better, but then there are some old habits that are coming in the way. I have clarity. I feel much better about myself than I did before Vedanta. But then there is this nagging feeling like I know what Brahman is like and my behavior is not mirroring this Brahman that I know. You see, Nididhyasanam does not produce knowledge, because knowledge itself is not a product. So what produces knowledge? Nothing. Really, the pramana, what does it do is indicates. The pramana alone indicates who you are by removing all the vrittis, all the orientations that do not belong. So the Shastra is the primary both the necessary and sufficient condition for the knowledge of oneself as Brahman. One doesn't need anything else. But then why are all these meditations and upasanas given? Adhikari bhedat. Because there are different kinds of adhikaris, qualified people for this knowledge, qualified students. The adhikari of the Upanishad, aka Shvetaketu, even better than Shvetaketu, little Nachiketa, they just all heard the whole teaching, got up and left. Shvetaketu needed only 9 classes before he said, I have understood everything. Only 9 classes. Very impressive, is it not? But then, those are what are called, Uttama Adhikarinaha. Uttama means very exalted. And they are all not really there in life. They are there in the pages of the Upanishad. 1 or 2 you may find in life, but generally they are ideal typical in the sense that they are there in the pages of the Upanishad to inspire the rest of us. Then on the other end of the continuum are Adhama Adhikarinaha. Adhama means inferior adhikaris, lowly qualified people, hardly qualified people. Who are they? They are also in the pages perhaps of the Upanishad or somewhere negative examples. People with too much ghora and tamo vrittis, and then what happens? Such people are actually not even interested in Vedanta if such people are there. But if somehow they stray into Vedanta because of previous punya, etc., they won't stay there for very long. So everyone somehow falls in the middle. Madhyama adhikarinaha. And so, for the Madhyama adhikaris, in addition to Shravanam, because if Shravanam does not produce the results that one wanted of clarity, of freedom from all kinds of difficulties, etc., then Mananam, meditation, asking questions, etc., is advised, and then that is to remove doubts. If the knowledge is riddled with doubts and vagueness, Mananam is prescribed, and if the knowledge is if the person complains of habitual orientations, old habit patterns that are refusing to die even after the knowledge, nididhyasanam, chewing the cud of the Upanishad, ruminating literally on the words of the Shastra that recalling the Mahavakyas and repeating them and seeing that they really apply to you. So the nididhyasana that we are going to enter here, excuse me, is not going to take the place of Shravanam. It's not going to take the place of Shravanam at all. What does it do? It simply banishes some orientations that should not have been there in the first place, that are based on habits. And so, most of the people being Madhyama Adhikaris, we welcome, as teachers and as students, we welcome Mananam and Nididhyasanam when Shravanam alone, Kevala Shravanam, does not help one to enjoy the freedom that is oneself. So then, therefore he says, this being the situation, evam sthite, this being the situation, the ones that want to contemplate upon Brahman, what should they do? They should upeksheta. Upeksheta means set aside. What? Everything that is non-existent, like the horns of the human being. Nrishingadi. Adipadat, other things that are non-existent, and then we can talk about what they are, but let us see the translation. So leave everything that is non-existent, and then shishtam, whatever is left after this non-existence has been cognitively removed, then dhyayet, may one contemplate yatha yatham. Yatha yatham means on that which is left. Faithfully. May one contemplate faithfully yatha yatham on that which is left behind after everything that is non-existent has been removed. So do you need to take an axe and remove everything that is, which are objects? No, that's not the point. First of all, what is it that is non-existent? The idea of getting happiness from the universe. You can, it's like squeezing a stone and hoping that oil will come out of it. That is exactly how it is to try to get happiness from the universe. So then, every object is, we saw in the yesterday's class, every object is riddled with the words as though. Every object disappears as soon as you inquire into it. What is this shirt? That which has shirtness. So, if shirt cannot have shirtness, because the definition is that which has shirtness. What is that? That of course is fabric. How can fabric have shirtness? Fabric cannot have shirtness because fabric has other, then we have to account for fabricness. That which has fabricness is fabric. That which has shirtness is shirt. So where is this shirtness? Shirtness is the property of non-shirt, as though. Non-shirt projects. Non-shirt means what? Ishvara projects the shirtness. Maya, Ishvara with Maya projects the shirtness, fabricness, yarnness, thisness, thatness, everything. Lockness, as in the monster. Okay, so all the nesses are all projections. They're all non-existence, like that Loch Ness monster. Every so few years, somebody writes there'll be a foggy day, and then somebody will write an article and show one hazy photograph of the Loch Ness monster. Same thing with the objects in the universe. The photographs may not be hazy, but their reality is sure hazy. You inquire into it and it disappears. Like even your own ahankara. The definition of ahankara is vicharam na sahate yaha, that which does not brook any enquiry. You start looking. Like our politicians, as soon as you start an enquiry, they just are gone. They can't stand, to be looked deep into. And so the ahankara is like that. It is unseated as soon as you start to conduct an enquiry. Oh, I love this. Okay, who is the one that is the lover of this object? Who is this who cannot live without this? You start asking. Who is this that who hates this object? And who is this? I. Who is this I? You start looking into it. The ahankara crawls somewhere, not to be seen again until it rears its head later on with regard to some more raga, dveshas and some pet peeves. Because when you say, I am hurt, I am restless, I am angry, I am sad, you are the observer of sadness, anger, hurt. You're not the sadness. And so therefore, this is something which is so important to see, is that when you look at the world, at the universe, or even at your own world, your own house, with these eyes, then you are surrounded by all the things which really do not exist. This is really food for thought. So you are surrounded by things that are as good as non-existent. This is where Panchadasi Kara wants you to graduate. A very tall order. So we have to modify his meditation a little bit by bringing in Bhagavan. So, if it is too much to say, all the things in the universe are non-existent and it rings false, it does not ring true, the best way to deal with it is to say, all the things in the world are Ishvara. Everything is Ishvara. All the things, even my own feelings, which one is not proud of, even one's own feelings, Ishvara. Bugs Ishvara, bugging people Ishvara, in-laws Ishvara, outlaws Ishvara, this Ishvara, that Ishvara, everything is Ishvara. This is actually a very good meditation. You Ishvarize the entire universe, and then in this Ishvarification, there is no more you as a separate entity, because your body, mind, sense complex is Ishvara. The one who is saying everything is Ishvara, cannot be left out, is also Ishvara. There is an instant clarity of the oneness of the whole thing. This is a very beautiful contemplation. You don't even, and another benefit to this contemplation is that you don't even have to sit in one place and close the eyes and say, I am going to meditate, and then all that. This can be a day-long, open-eyed meditation. You can just look out of your window and you see a tree. And then that tree, Ishvara. The life force in the tree, Ishvara. The colors, the various greens that are there. The baby leaves are light green, the bigger leaves are darker green, Ishvara. Branches, Ishvara. The sap of the tree, Ishvara. Roots, Ishvara. Fruits, Ishvara. Flowers, Ishvara. And who is the observer? Ishvara. Observer, Ishvara. Observed Ishvara. So the distinction between the observer and observed is being mithya. It resolves immediately, because everything is Ishvara. And then you go on to the next thing and next thing and next thing. And then with this practice, one gains a certain, not only a clarity, but also one gains a certain repose. Non-reactivity comes, because the tree is harmless, correct? It's not coming out to get you. It's fine to say tree is Ishvara, but what about something which is difficult to deal with? And so we graduate from tree to things that are difficult to deal with in this kind of a contemplation, and then one becomes less and less reactive. And the pratibandha, the difficulties to gaining this clarity, goes away. The pratibandhas dropped and the shravanam pays off. And so, let's look at the next verse here. Shiladau nama rupe dve tyaktva sanmatra chintanam. Shiladau nama rupe dve tyaktva Sanmatra chintanam tyaktva dukkham ghora mudha dhiyo satchidvichintanam tyaktva dukkham ghora mudha dhiyo satchidvichintanam. Shiladau, in the stone, etc., stone, wood, etc. Because he's talking of giving up a few things and retaining and then contemplating on what is left. Giving up the non-existent. So in the stone, what is non-existent? According to this teaching, the name stone is as good as non-existent. The form stone is as good as non-existent, because what inhabits the stone is Sat. Inhabits again within quotes. Inhabits. The stone is Sat. Stone is Sat, because the existence of the stone belongs to Sat. We have seen this. So, like children who, when they are given a modak, a sweet with a filling, what do? They remove the outer covering and they just go for what is inside. And what is inside is called purnam, that which is full. So they go for the fullness after removing the outer covering, and that is exactly the kind of contemplation that Svatmavidyananda wants everyone to do. In everything that has name and form, especially now we are talking of inert things. In inert things that have name and form, inert objects, then you remove the name, you remove the form, cognitively of course. Disregard the name, disregard the form, and what is left? Only Ishvara. And that only Sat. What is Sat? Sat is another name for Ishvara. So that alone you contemplate on. This is how to Ishvarize the stone, Ishvarize a piece of wood, Ishvarize all the insentient objects in the universe. You disregard its name. What's in a name? Nothing. And then disregard the form. Don't go for the word and its meaning, name and its form. Leave that alone. And then what is left? What you see is just Sat. See again within quotes, because the one who sees, you cannot see Sat, you are Sat. So what is left is Ishvara. That is all that is left. Because Ishvara has entered this whole universe. So here, Ishvara from the standpoint of Sat in the case of insentient objects, because even though the sentience is there in all objects, in those which don't have a subtle body, that broadcasting of that sentience is not possible. So only Sat is there. There is a beautiful verse in the Kathopanishad which directs us to a similar contemplation. Ham sashuchi sat vasurantariksha sat nrisat athithir durona sat nrisat varasat ritasat. Like this there is a verse. Abja goja ritam mahat. What does it mean? Any object that you see, you give it the last name of Sat. So the pure Hamsa, the swan. Yes, it has a name, Hamsa, it has a form, Hamsa, and it is pure, Shuchi. But then, what do you say? Sat. Every object in this universe has the last name Sat. And you know, in formal situations, you just refer to the person by the last name. So similarly here, you refer to everything by its common last name, which is Sat. Nrisat, people Sat, human Sat, object Sat, Varasat, Rita Sat, everything. All these objects are named and they are all Sat, 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 Sat. The objects, fade away in one's awareness. All that is there is Sat. That Sat being oneself, it is Aikya, oneness. It is the enjoyment of oneness. And you see where he is getting to. This enjoyment doesn't go away because it is instantly available and it is never ending. But if you focus on the name and form, if you dwell on the name and form, then that object does not have the capacity to give joy, and soon it ends in despair. And then, so this is what to do with the universe. With the insentient aspects of the universe, you cognitively disregard the name and the form, and then what is left? This is, you don't say, I don't know what is left, I have to think about it. I've already given the answer, it is Sat. Sat in the form of Ishvara, and so you just say this is Ishvara. Ishvara with the name and form. Name and form keeps varying. It comes and goes. Is born and is subject to death. So that which is constant in every object is Sat. The last name of all objects, insentient objects, are Sat. What about sentient objects, sentient things? They also have a last name, Satchit. So they are Satchit, 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 Satchit. That's the second line. Tyaktva dukkham ghora mudha dhiyoho Satchit vichintanam. So here we come straight to the mad mind, which is housing a preponderance of the ghora and mudha vrittis. So what is the sum total of ghora and mudha vrittis? What do they produce? The answer is sorrow. The sorrow they produce, and that sorrow is immediately disregarded. Tyaktva, renounced. How to renounce? Disidentify with that sorrow consciously and say, these are the workings of the mad vrittis. I am Ishvara. And then who are you? I am Sat and Chit right now. But how come I am not Ananda? Well, because the ghora and mudha vrittis are preponderating. Right now there is no Ananda. But at least one can contemplate on Ishvara as Satchit, in and through one's anger, in and through one's restlessness, in and through one's sorrow. Very beautiful. One can contemplate. So the sad person can also contemplate on Brahman. How? Disregard the sadness and know that it is the product of the vrittis. It is not your nature. Then what is my nature? Right now it is Satchit. Satchit, it is that awareness which is aware of the sorrow. It is aware of the sorrow, and therefore it is Satchit. It exists and it is an object of my awareness. So that awareness is Brahman, and that awareness is the only thing that is existing. So giving up the misery, what happens in Rajasika and Tamasika vrittis, giving up the misery, rejecting the misery that they produce, only contemplate on oneself, we have to say, as existence and consciousness. Then what? The next one. Shantasu Satchidanandan Trinapyevam Vichintayet. Shantasu Satchidanandan Trinapyevam Vichintayet. Kanishtamadhyamotkrishtah Tisraschintakramaadimaah. Kanishtamadhyamotkrishtah Tisraschintakramaadimaah. Shantasu, in a peaceful, serene, sattvic vritti, all three are available. What all three? Sat, Chit, Ananda. Sat, Chit, Ananda, all three are available. Where? In the Shanta, in a mind that is embraced by the Shanta vritti. Sat is available, Chit is available, Ananda is available. It's all right there. Trinapi, all these three, evam vichintayet. Contemplate on all three. What are all three? Sat, that it is, I am conscious of it, awareness. And Shanta is, tranquility is, serenity is, and that serenity I am conscious of. So that awareness is, And that awareness is what? Without a second, and it is limitless. Limitless joy is. Even though the Shanta Vritti to borrow the previous Vada, Pratibimba Vada, we can say the Shanta Vritti exudes the joy, is a carrier of the joy. The joy does not belong to the Vritti. It simply is one's own nature that is mirrored. When the fog of the Ghora Vritti and Mudha Vritti are cleaned off, what is mirrored is the truth of the self. So now we have here, he has given 3 kinds of meditation. So the first one is what? 3 kinds of contemplation. The first one is just to sum it up, look at the objects and then focus on what they have all in common. What do they all have in common? That they exist. And that existence belongs to Ishvara, not to the objects themselves, because the objects are changing, Ishvara constant. So Ishvara is the object. Objects are always changing, Ishvara is constant. Like flower and bud, unblossomed flower in the form of a bud, we saw that. And the blossoming flower, withering flower, dead flower, but you still say is. Contemplate on that isness. That isness alone is Ishvara. This is contemplation number 1. Contemplation number 2 is looking at one's own mind. You see, it's easier to look at the object in front of you, and the mind being more subtle is more difficult to objectify. So the second one is a step up, because here you're objectifying that which is a little harder to objectify, namely the mad mind. And then what do you see here? What is there? Sat is there, but then there is a tsunami. There is a big tsunami along with the Sat. What is that? I am aware that there is a tsunami. Sat is there, Chit is there. So Ishvara from 2 standpoints, Sat and Chit, is present. So I am conscious of my sorrow. This itself becomes a contemplation. Sorrow exists, yes, but that existence belongs to Ishvara, so sorrow is actually non-existent, and I am conscious of the sorrow, so that is also that consciousness belongs to Ishvara. So Satchit as Ishvara, my body, mind, sense complex Ishvara, even the bad mood I seem to be in Ishvara. Very nice. So this is the second form of contemplation. And the third form of contemplation is when one is in a tranquil space. When one is in a tranquil space, when the Ghora and Mudha vrittis don't intensify and compete with one another to hook onto you. When one is in that space, then one can contemplate on oneself as Brahman from the standpoint of Sat, Chit and Ananda, limitlessly joyful, limitlessly existent, limitlessly sentient. And then he's going to say that these three, and these three, what are these? These 3 forms of contemplation, which we have just revised, are as follows. The first one is an inferior form of contemplation. The second one is a middling form of contemplation. And the third one, the last one, is an exalted, the most exalted form of contemplation. Respectively, Kramadimaha. Kramadimaha means respectively. The first one, Kanishtha means the first one. We have to join the dots here. The first one is Kanishtha. What is the first one? Contemplating on the existence of objects. This is a inferior form of contemplation. And then what is the next one? Contemplating on the existence and sentience both at the same time. Then this is a somewhat mediocre form of contemplation. And the third one is where you want to grow. Where you want to go ultimately is to be able to see Sat Chit Ananda in everything. You are able to see the whole of Ishvara as Satchidananda in everything. And so why it is graded like this: inferior, mediocre, and exalted. And then why that's the first question. Why is it graded like this? Second question: why not just give us the exalted form? Why bother with the middle one and the inferior one? If you go to the shop, the shopkeeper will not say this is just a horrible variety and then this is a mediocre variety. So even if they are selling a horrible variety, they will say this is fine, don't worry. It's nice because it's not as expensive. Please take, please buy. That is what they will say. So why even discuss this and then call it horrible? These two questions we will see in the next class. I'll stop a little early because I want to see if anybody has any questions, so that we can have some time to discuss anything that needs to be talked about. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om.